Hi everybody, it's Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to a special episode of Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. So you're probably wondering what the heck we're looking at here. Well, this is the first episode of this series that is going to be showing a game from the Commodore PET computer platform. Even if you're familiar with Commodore, you may not know what the PET is. The PET is a very old platform from Commodore, one of their first ones, and it predates the home computer platforms they're generally known for, like the Commodore 64, the VIC-20, the Commodore 128, etc. It was principally a business computer. It didn't have color graphics, it had very, very minimal sound capabilities, and it wasn't made for games, frankly. It was designed to be in an office. But some people did make games for it. They were very crude by modern standards, but some of them were pretty interesting. And I wanted to show you guys a very special game today. Special because of who made it. And the title screen gives it away, which is why we haven't actually started it yet. But I'm going to fire this up here. This is how you loaded up a game on these old Commodore platforms. So this just takes a second here. Commodores were famous for their exceedingly long loading times, but this game was pretty straightforward. So here we go. Yes, indeed. This is Car Race 2, developed by Satoru Iwata. Yes, that Satoru Iwata. This was the first game, or at least the first publicly released game, by the famed and beloved president and CEO of Nintendo, who sadly passed away this past weekend at time of recording. I did a little in memory of blog post on geekbravado.com about him, if you want to go check that out, but I thought it was fitting for Retro Flashback to play tribute, indeed, to this incredible game industry figure by checking this game out. This is the first thing he ever released, and it was done for the Commodore PET, which had a modest following in Japan, if I recall, but it nonetheless had one, and it appears that it was done for a PET users club, so just a public group of people who were into the Commodore PET. This is a very simplistic, very hard score attack racing game, so yes, we do want instruction. There's what your car looks like. Yeah, like I said, the PET was a business computer. It was not a graphical powerhouse. Most of the stuff that you did in it was built out of text elements. So you can see here there's only 3 keys: acceleration, handle left, and handle right. This was very poorly translated, as you can see. Score for extend play. So basically what you've got to do, I'm just going to show you here. Yeah, this is it. Welcome to Car Race 2. So it's a score attack game. Your goal is to get out into the track, race as fast as you can, as far as you can, and the faster you go, obviously you can see there, the faster your score increases, and your goal is to get as much as you can before time expires. And if you hit certain extend play bonus targets, you get bonus time. That's the bulk of it. So you see how you sort of start off to the right there. Yes, the slip zone. We'll get into that. So you see how you sort of start... Oh, geez. Yes, I'm going to explain this in a minute. So you see you start off to the right here in this little sort of side area. So you can get up to speed there if you want, but your score doesn't start accumulating until you get out into the track. Once you're out into the track, you'll see that the color of the border changes. It goes from a sort of staggered pattern on those blocks to a solid one. There. Once it goes solid, you can't cross either side, or you crash, I guess, is what it is. So you can, there's no limit to your lives here. It's just based on time. So you can crash as many times as you want. Obviously, hitting other cars has the same effect. But every time you crash, you have to start over. You have to start at the slow speed, and it takes a while to get up to speed, and you've got to try to get going and get as many points as you can. So you may see what's called the slip zone there, which is when the screen goes, this basically reverses, and because this becomes this really bright, obnoxious green. So what happens is when you're in the slip zone, if you try to steer either left or right, your car will keep going. You can't stop and keep going in a straight line like you can when you're on normal track surface. That gets really, really brutal really quick here. So you see high score 3201. That's I think the high score that was built onto this disk image. Also, you may have heard, or rather not, you may not be hearing any sound effects. There's actually nothing wrong with the video. This game has no sound, which was not uncommon for Commodore PET games. I thought about putting a music track in the background of this, but I figured, given the type of video this is, it was probably best not to do that. But this is basically it. It's, as you can see, you only have 3 buttons, so you can get up to your top speed there, and then when you let off of A, your car will start to decelerate. So you want to kind of feather the throttle as much as you can to try to stay out of the way of these, frankly, whack job other drivers who just seem to be kind of randomly going all over the place. So here's the slip zone. So I'm going to get up to speed and show you what this is like. This part is where the game becomes basically impossible. Because when you're in the slip zone, you have no way to get your car in a straight line, and you move so quickly from side to side that it's very, very hard to control yourself. If you can actually get through a slip zone without doing that, well, you're a better gamer than I am, I have to tell you. But I just thought this was very interesting. I mean, this game, by any kind of modern standard, is, almost hysterically crude. I mean, Commodore PETs were not gaming platforms, and in many cases, the people who made games for them did so because that was what they had access to, and when, they were learning to program and they wanted to make a game, they worked with what they had. And I presume that's what Mr. Iwata did with this. I don't know. I only found out about this game yesterday after it was announced that he passed away. I actually didn't know he'd ever worked on anything like this. So there we go. 1433. I did not too bad there. So, and you see here it just loops. You hit the space bar when the game's over, and it loops back to the beginning. This is a very basic game. It was clearly done, I assume, as some kind of hobby project or something like that. Given that it was done for a PET users group, that's probably the case. I mean, if you were starting out programming, this would not be the easiest thing in the world to make. So, especially on a Commodore PET, which was very difficult to develop for because of the way Commodore BASIC worked. I don't actually know if this was made in BASIC or not, but it might have been. So, I mean, this doesn't. This is not necessarily a game that holds any real historical significance or was a trendsetter or anything like that. There were arcade games that played not unlike this, very, very early arcade games that actually just ran, that just had, they were integrated circuit games, basically. They had no microprocessor in them, and they were incredibly crude, almost like this. Some of them did have sound, if you want to call it that, but there were games in the arcade that were very much like this, and this was kind of a home version of that, just done by a hobbyist, and it's pretty amazing. And I think it's very interesting to see where Iwata began, because his career was spent mostly in programming. He was actually a game programmer and developer long before he was a corporate executive. He spent most of his career at the well-known developer HAL Laboratory, who has done a number of great games over the years, including Kirby. He worked on Earthbound. He worked on Balloon Fight, which is a game I've shown on the channel before. He was a programmer through and through, and from what I understand from reading about him, he was a pretty badass programmer, actually. He did some pretty incredible stuff, and he spent a long time doing that before he became a corporate executive and eventually president and CEO of Nintendo, and led them through the Wii and DS years and the some of the biggest successes in their life. And yes, he also led them through the time they're in now, which has the Wii U and some of the other things. Nintendo is not as healthy as they once were, though in his tenure, they made so much money that apparently they could last until something like 2050 before ever running out of money, and not even credit, just cash in the bank. To say that he did not lead Nintendo to some of the biggest successes in their history is just a falsehood. His time there was unparalleled, and the influence that he had on the gaming industry cannot be overstated, in my opinion. He was a visionary, and the thing that I really loved about him is that he was actually a corporate executive in the games industry who was actually a gamer. He was a gamer first. He loved to play games. He actually knew how games were made, which most gaming CEOs do not. Most gaming CEOs don't even play games, much less know how to make them. And he understood he understood quality and the challenges of game development, and that making good things often takes time. And under his leadership, we've had some of the best video games ever. And I think it's really interesting just to see where the man's humble beginnings were. And this is it. You know, a very crude racing game for a computer that wasn't built for games. And I think, frankly, that says more about him than anything else. You know, the first place he made a game that got out to the public was on a platform that wasn't built for video games. You know, the Commodore PET was not made to play games, but he made a game on it. He defied convention and expectation and did something that wasn't supposed to be done. And I think that's what a lot of his career was. You know, look at the Wii, look at the DS. People thought Nintendo and he in general were crazy for those things because they were completely different. And they were things that defied convention and did something no one else had ever done before. And people thought they were crazy, and they are two of the most successful video game platforms ever created. And he was a big part of that. Of course, he wasn't the only one responsible for the success of those machines, but he was a big part of it. And, you know, the first game he ever made was a game for a computer that wasn't made for games. Says a lot, doesn't it? So there's not much else to show of this, honestly. You've really got the meat and potatoes of Car Race 2. I just thought it was really, really fascinating, and I wanted to show this off. It's my own little way of doing a tribute to one of the most incredible figures in the history of video games, a man who I never had the pleasure of meeting, but who I really would have loved to. I would have loved to have just had the opportunity to shake his hand and say, you know, the impact that he and his company and their products have had on my life, both as a gamer and just as a human being. He left us way too soon, and it's very sad. And I'm sure Nintendo will go on. I'm sure Nintendo will continue to do amazing things and continue on using the groundwork that he's laid. But yeah, he left us way too soon. So yeah, that is Car Race 2, developed by Satoru Iwata in 1980 for the Commodore PET. It's an interesting history lesson, and I think says much more about the man than just you might gather on the surface. Iwata-san, thank you for everything you have done. You will never be forgotten. Rest in peace, sir. My name's Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.